You can ask your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring them and make sure that we address them towards the end. Just so you know, this webinar is recorded and we'll make it available on our website in the next 72 hours. Just wanted to do a quick commercial for our next webinar, which is on November 18th. That one will be a CEU accredited presentation, unlike the one today. And that has an equally intriguing title, The Power of Acoustic Lighting. So I hope you'll tune into that one. Just want to quickly introduce you to Mark. Mark Ainley, he is a contemporary Feng Shui consultant, a sense of space. He has taught, consulted, and appeared in print and TV media around the world for the past 20 years. And he's worked with clients globally, from San Francisco to Qatar to Tokyo and Australia, and worked on projects in condos, homes, and also commercial settings. I got to have a really nice chat with Mark yesterday, and I really enjoyed chatting with him. He offers a really balanced, flexible, and very common sense approach to flow optimization with the Feng Shui, and has helped thousands of clients worldwide to streamline their experiences with their outer environment and their inner states of being. So we're very excited to have you, Mark, and I am handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. I always appreciate, given our screen and Zoom fatigue era that we're living in, that you are making the choice to join, especially when I'm not CEU credited, but hopefully some credits on a higher energetic level that will serve you, even if not everybody will recognize it. So I'm going to start screen sharing in just a second. This is a topic that I can talk for hours about, and we don't have hours today. So again, I'm going to be very creative and adaptable with how this works, and to make sure that we're going to have some time for questions, so that if there's any clarification that's needed, I'll be able to offer that, and particularly in how you can apply these principles. I'm going to be speaking to some of the energetic background of why these design principles are working, and then go into the application. If you can have your mobile phones handy, this is going to be an interactive presentation with Mentimeter. There will be a QR code that you'll be able to scan real quickly, and I am going to get it started. So here we go. So getting out of line. Here we're talking about creativity and adaptability in the built environment. And, the last 18 months certainly has taught us that adaptability is probably one of the most prized and, dare I say, not to minimize it, profitable qualities. Because the people who have been adaptable have been able to manage in these very difficult times. And businesses, if they weren't properly aligned to profit or benefit from the circumstances that were going on, their adaptability has helped them to thrive. And those that weren't able to adapt, unfortunately, haven't done as well, and hopefully can, gain some ground. But there are, as I work with Feng Shui, the general principle is there is an impact on your mindset and the behavior that your environment can encourage through the design. And adaptability is one of those qualities that design can speak to. So let me see if there's changing the screen. If you want to get out your phone, do a little QR code snap over here, and that should open up your browser. There's also, you can do little hearts and little comments and so on at the bottom of the page, which is great for engagement. It's good for your dopamine, and also good for mine to see a little bit of feedback. So if you want to do some little clicks there, fabulous. That's one of the things with Zoom fatigue, right, is that we don't actually get to be engaged and participate, and here you do. And again, time for questions after. So I'm going to connect in the introduction here, Feng Shui with biophilia, which, as far as I'm concerned, biophilia has proven some Feng Shui principles scientifically, and I think there is more that's waiting to be proved, but we're going to be making a little connection over here, looking at a few of the key principles and how the forms of architecture and design relate to what we see in nature, specifically lines and curves and how those can nurture adaptability and creativity or not, and how we can balance these forms in our design and architecture. And then we'll have some questions. So Feng Shui, every time I explain the words, I explain it differently. But basically, I consider it to be the language of nature. It's how things function. So if there was an operating system for the world that we live in, Feng Shui would kind of be the manual for how things flow, for how things interact. So it's a bit of the OS, right? And it's not the OS that needs the upgrade. It's kind of us using that needs the upgrade over here. So biophilia is absolutely related to Feng Shui because it is about the way of nature. So what I'm curious about, since we have designers in the house, how much do you incorporate or use biophilic design principles on a scale of minimally to I'm a biophilia poster child? How much do you use them? Okay. A little bit of a mixed bag. This is great to see. Another thing I love about Mentimeter is it's anonymous, right? So nobody's going to be taking your license away or anything like that, or casting aspersions upon you for this. But let's explore some of the principles and some of how it can relate and really support the designs that we're creating, ideally, obviously, to support the people who are in those spaces. There are 14 design principles in biophilia. These are some that are going to relate to what I'm talking about today. There's a visual and non-visual connection with nature. Non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, which I think is really cool, and I'm going to translate into a different mode, because I think these are all different faces of the same thing. How not always doing the same thing for the same period of time regularly is key. That's what non-rhythmic actually is. Connection with natural systems, biomorphic forms and patterns, and complexity and order. These are all things that serve people in their being. And when brought into design, these are going to serve people in that environment. So let's start to think, because obviously humans have, the whole principle of biophilia is that humans are drawn to nature, but we also like built environments. If you wanted to go on a relaxing holiday, where would you go and why? So you get to put in a few answers. Would it be a beach? Would it be New York, like a city, resort? Where would you like to go and why generally? And there might be more than one kind of answer, right? Sometimes we like the beach. Sometimes we like a city. We'll just take a moment and put in your answers. Paddle on the lake, nice. Mexico, Caribbean beach, sun, sand, lots of beach. Doing nothing, lake, lots of water, mountains. Notice how much water there is here. Somewhere warm. Cabin on a lake with no Wi-Fi, right on. Comfortable, snow in the mountains, awesome. So a lot of nature. Right? Okay. I love this interactivity. So we've got 15 people who've answered so far, a few more to enter, but I'm going to move ahead. You can still enter your answers and they'll show up. I can send a PDF afterwards with all of everybody's answers so we can get some insight. Thank you for answering. So, hello, built environment, and if you're on that plane, goodbye, built environment. We often want to go to nature. A lot of you put beach. And I want you to take a look at what's the primary difference that you see. If you look at this, and look at this, one of the key differences is the forms. This is one of the big things with biophilia and with Feng Shui. Where's the straight lines? Even here, where we have a built environment in Greece, the straight lines are complemented, are mitigated by actual nature, not just natural forms, but actual embodiments and physical placement of natural items. And what a difference. I'm not saying cities are all bad. I love New York, not just because it says that on a t-shirt. It's a great place and it's really vibrant. And I mean, look at that, right? So when you think though, when you look at the difference and kind of breathe it in, you know, look at that, just tune into your body. How does that feel? And how does that feel? Then it's no wonder that you want to be on that plane getting out of there. So here's the question, and it's something I think we don't often consider. Where do we find straight lines in nature? What are some examples of things that are linear, straight forms in nature? It might take a second. Horizon, great. Guess what the next image is? Trees, okay. Tree trunk. So a few people entered trees. Okay. Ice, excellent. Okay, and let's just really consider, are any of these things really straight? Tree trunks are not as straight and branches are not as straight as the edges on our furniture. Neither are icicles. And the horizon, unless we're into the flat earth theory, is also curved, even though it looks flat and straight. Micro elements, now we're getting into something, because straight lines tend to be building blocks. And when they are expressed in the physical world in a more sizable form, they actually have a certain quality. Thank you for these fantastic answers. I love them. So yeah, we have the horizon, and yet it is curved. And notice how, even though the water looks flat, it's also not flat. Notice how those lines that are on there are also not straight. Right, so it's kind of straight, but not. And here, if you look at especially the stems where the flowers are, those are the straight ones. The actual larger stem is curved. But those other stems are straight, but the edge of it, the end of it is not straight. They don't come together. Something else comes out of it. Whereas things that are really straight that come together have that point, right? And that takes on an aggressive quality. When you see straight lines in nature, they inherently have an aggressive, protective quality. And the protection comes in the form of aggression, right? Cactus designed this to say, keep away, that liquid's mine. And how our nervous system reads the straight edges of tables and other furniture is like the blade of a knife. And it's similar also to the pointing of a finger, an action which is considered rude in every culture on the planet, right? It puts our nervous system on high alert, and what we tend to be unaware of because we are so disconnected from a lot of our experience because we've been taught so many things that we've learned how not to tune in, is that these straight edges in our environment put us on edge. And so we end up working in environments like this with how many straight lines? And then what does that do to your nervous system? Take a look at your body, folks. Where's the straight lines? You look at your finger, and actually it's really not straight because it's got those bends, right? In nature, straight lines do not continue to the same proportional length as they do in built environmental design. And yet, how much work do we do, not just in the environment, but we also work with straight pieces of paper and straight rulers and draw these straight lines. And have you ever been cut by a piece of paper, right? That paper cut is actually symptomatic and representative of the quality of energy that you have from those straight lines, like the blade of a knife. So right now, if you were to look at the built environment that you yourself are in, how linear are your surroundings right now? On a scale of like being in 3D graph paper to nonlinear and asymmetrical. How linear are your surroundings? Okay. A little all over. And middle of the road is actually pretty good, right? Unless there's traffic. This is a pretty good reading right now. Okay. Good. And we're going to take a look at it. And I want to be clear also, I'm not demonizing straight lines per se, even though it will sound like it, and we are going to go through this afterwards. It's simply the fact that there are consequences to all of these shapes. And if we're unaware of them, we might be creating undesirable consequences and unintended circumstances and mindsets. So we are going to learn how is it that we create that balance. 5.6 is a pretty nice balance, right? We don't necessarily want to go super nonlinear and asymmetrical and have everything draped like in Victorian times, because you can't really see where anything is, right? Everything has its strength and weakness, and we want to find the ideal balance for what it is that we're aiming to design. So for example, look at all those straight buildings. And if you cover up the screen and just look at the buildings, and then you see the trees, how different that view is, right? It helps to, on ground level, you're actually not going to see it as much, right? Because you're going to see the trunks primarily, but it does change the atmosphere and the nature of things. And that's one of the things I love about where I live in Vancouver. I have trees on my street. A friend of mine who was visiting from Tokyo made sure to comment on that, because don't have trees on a lot of the streets over there. Lots of linear buildings like these. So straight lines also, right? Not just the buildings, but the passageways that we tend to have in our society. And I want us to think, and this is something we're going to look at, what is it that starts to happen when you're driving on a straight road? What starts to become your mindset? And how is it that you drive? Now, when you look at it, it's a little bit like that cactus quill, right? You see the two lines and they come together at a point in the distance, and that is your destination. And essentially, spoiler alert, this kind of shape is very much, a straight line is geometry, right? This is what they tell us, the shortest distance between 2 points. It's very efficient, it's faster. And what does that say about adaptability and creativity? It might serve, not necessarily all the time, right? And so when we see that straight line, that's been carved through the environment, whereas the one on the right has been built with the environment and has adapted to the forms of the environment. And that right side might have its own issues as well, because your experience driving there isn't going to be the same, and there's benefits to both. But there is something really important with what's going on the right-hand side that relates to the human experience and on a larger scale, in general, lived experience. So let's take a look. Let's do a little brainstorming together. You can enter multiple answers over here because there's a few questions. What's it like driving on a straight road, right? What's your experience like? How is it that you feel? And what do you have to do? Is there something that you have to do? Is there something you tend to do? So what's your experience? Just enter a few answers over here. Sorry, I don't have background music while we do this. Zone out, interesting. Ooh, a couple of people wrote zone out. Boring, need to stay focused. Yes, okay. I normally teach this in person and it's very different in that case, because it's wonderful hearing all of these answers. All of these answers are fantastic. It can get sleepy, it can get boring. Why? There's no change in scene. You're focused on one thing in the future. And so what happens to your present time experience, right? What you're looking at is over there and you're not engaging with anything changing, right? There's a term, hedonic adaptation, which is basically where we start to zone out and experience things that are routine as same old, same old. And this kicks in very, very quickly when we're driving. So you're going to play the loud music. And this is why people are tempted to text, because they need some new sense input and it's not coming from their physical actions in the world. Okay, thank you very much. It's dangerous if you lose focus in all of the driving on the meandering road too, but this is absolutely a great point. For me, the temptation is to speed up, and you keep speeding up and the speed builds, right? You can build momentum. I'm going to be taking a look at that again shortly. So what's it like conversely, driving on a curved road. Again, it's not necessarily all positive. What's the experience like? How do you feel? What do you do? Yeah, absolutely could get nauseous. This one's definitely on the meandering side. Visual interest, yes, because the scenery is changing moment by moment. Exhilarating, it is at a certain speed for sure. Fun, slow up and speed down, engaging. It is engaging, right? You have to stay alert and surprises on each turn. So when things are same old, there's not a whole lot of surprise, right? Because things are kind of the same. But the reality itself is changing moment by moment, but we don't always experience that. When you're on a pathway like this, you are actually experiencing the unexpected, and you don't know pink elephant pineapple. You didn't expect me to say that, right? That was a surprise. So you don't know what's coming. And so things can, right? You can be in that present moment experiencing what's around the corner. This is why people gamble. This is why they go to casinos, because they want to, there's that cost and that value to actually having a present time experience. Right, so aerial view and road level view. What's around the corner? I don't know what's coming. That can be a great thing. It can also be a frightening thing, but if we cultivate that curiosity, it can really serve us, right? And that is what we enjoy in our trips when we're going somewhere. We're experiencing something new. We don't know what's coming. What's the food going to be like? Where are we going to eat tonight? Right? What kind of pina colada am I going to have tonight on the beach? Right? You get to decide. So, two very different experiences. So what does this have to do with design? That's coming. But let's just take a look as well. You can see visually here, those straight rivers in nature are energetically like those porcupine quills or cactus quills, where they are aggressive. If there's any obstacle, right? If a tree fell in the river on the left, what would happen? It would get swept away, right? If you were to enter that river, what would that be like? Versus the one on the right. We're going to do a little analysis of the one on the right as well. And the reason this is important is life does not flow in a straight line, just like we don't have straight lines in nature. Do we then expect our experience in the natural world, even that includes the built environment, to be any different? Well, we do expect it because our architecture tells us to expect it. Our design expects us. I should just be able to go from this point to this point. Nice and efficient, right? And the reality is there's always those curveballs that life throws our way. And life is a journey, not a destination. At the risk of sounding like a cheesy greeting card, there is truth to it. The other thing, in addition to hedonic adaptation, the key takeaway I had from Yale University's Science of Wellbeing course is that things don't bring us pleasure in life, it's experiences. And it's the fact that experiences change and that they have an ending that actually makes them enjoyable. And so that plan, that straight line, actually doesn't serve a whole lot. And it isn't really enjoyable. As challenging as that whole, I thought I was going to be on a funicular and now I'm in a boat kind of situation on the lower one, the fact that it's changing actually is when you get your belief system out of the way and you tune into your innate adaptability. That is a lot more enjoyable. So creativity actually requires adaptability, and in adaptability, there are no obstacles. The obstacle is the negative belief system that this is a problem. Whereas if you're adaptable, hey, here's a rerouting opportunity. Which way am I going to go now? And if we take a look at, as kids, how much we had these curved and wavy lines, and then we learned how to draw things in straight lines, and then the color disappeared, and we started getting things, again, a lot boxier. Again, it's not the natural way. And if you plug yourself into a machine at the hospital, or somebody else plugs you into it, you really hope you're not going to have a straight line coming out of the reading, because what does that mean if you have a flat line, right? And yet we do surround ourselves by those uniform straight lines. Again, they have their benefits, but balance. Great quote I came across yesterday, in fact, by Pierre Cardin, that everything in the universe is round from planets to specks of dust. From the cells of the human body to the infinity of the cosmos. So we're looking micro and macro. The circle symbolizes infinity and perpetual movement. In short, it symbolizes life. I would adjust this myself, because circles, again, can be a closed loop. And, you know, they can have their challenges too. But what we want ideally is a synthesis, and to recognize that curves are everywhere. And when we analyze a curve in this river, we have a straight line. We start moving towards our envisioned goal in a straight line, and then meet something, meet some land, meet an obstacle, and say, okay, which way can I go now? I'm going to go this way. You don't pout and stop flowing. Humans do, right? But water doesn't. And continue straight along on this new trajectory. And then what? And then you go straight. And then what? You come across something else. So rather than labeling this obstacle as an obstacle, this is just, okay, this is rerouting. This is the path we need to take. And the quality of the journey, as well as, right, who you are and how you experience things at the end of your destination, is by its nature different. I also spoke to somebody who worked in mineral mining and specializing in gold. And she said, gold, when it's found in the rivers, gold accumulates at the curves. I thought that was revealing, right? So don't discount the obstacles. There's a book called The Obstacle is the Way. If you look at the shape of that river, the way being the river, the shape of it is due to those obstacles. In the moment, your experience of it might be one thing, and if you choose to adapt, it doesn't have to be a problem. So let's take a look then. What are the positive qualities and effects of straight lines? There are some positive ones. I haven't said everything yet, because again, this is a short presentation, and I also want your own neurons to be tingling and engaging. So what are some positive qualities and effects? Organized, yes, absolutely. Easy to design, absolutely, especially if you're using a ruler and graph paper. Predictable, yes. Predictable can be a positive quality, it can also be a negative one, right? Depending, right? Organized and predictable, yes. We could say dependable, reliable. Organized, clean, fast, yes, right? There are times when this clean, fast directness is great. Some of this material is just a lot easier to teach in person, but you know, if I want to reach for my coffee cup, I'm not necessarily going to do a pirouette in this whole interpretive dance to then reach for my coffee cup. I'm going to just reach out and take my coffee cup, right? So you don't have to go overboard with this principle. But when an inevitable block comes your way, do you still keep trying to hammer your way through in a straight line, or do you then bend and adapt? Keeps us on track. Yes, of course, train tracks that are going straight, right? Really useful. So it's important, right? We're recognizing there are benefits to us as civilized life forms with a certain level of intelligence, being able to use this form well. And we also come from nature, and there's other benefits. What are some of the negative qualities and effects of straight lines? Enter an answer or two. Somebody else put in for the straight lines in the chat. No decision needs to be made. That's great. Every time I teach this material, and I've been teaching this particular element for 20 years, and it's not really in any of the Feng Shui books except the one that I'm writing, I always get some new insight from participants, so I really appreciate that. Thanks. Predictable, rigid, boring, monotony. Yeah, exactly. Uneventful, and here predictable we have as a negative, right? Monotony, right? So monotonous, it does become predictable and monotonous and a little less. Okay. Just looking at the time, looking at where we are in the presentation, I think we're okay. I'm really appreciating your feedback. Opportunity exists outside. Oh. Okay. Shows imperfections. Ooh, yes. And let's just say anything that varies from that rigid form is seen as imperfect, whether it is or not. I lived for 5 years in Japan and teach there regularly, pre-COVID anyway, although I'm teaching online now. And they have an expression there, which is the nail that stands up needs to be hammered down. So, right, which is basically saying that which varies from the linear needs to be bent out of its shape to fit the overall shape. Right, so let's take a look. Positive qualities and effects of curved or round forms. And again, I'm not talking circular. We don't necessarily want circles or spirals like, you know, although let it be said that food, which is round in shape, like pizza and cookies, tend to disappear really quickly. So they are pretty popular, but let's look. So some of the positive effects. Somebody wrote organic in the chat. If you've got your phone handy, you can go to that website as well, but I'll try to monitor those comments too. Non-threatening, soothing, creative, I love it. Delightful, fun, elegant, non-threatening, friendly. Sense of gathering, it's true. That said, in a business meeting, right, a round table can make it hard for there to be a leader. So it depends, right? Again, always in balance, right? The Knights of the Round Table all kind of ran off in different directions. This is what happens when you have that energy spiraling around quickly. This is why that straight line with the incomplete round line fused together in those curves has a very different integrative and integrating effect. Thank you for your answers. Negative, there might be negative qualities and effects to curved round forms. Messy, yeah. Time consuming, ooh, lose focus, lack of clarity, inefficient, take up more space, yes, true. Can't put your elbows on the table. Just so you know, actually, I heard this from a Feng Shui teacher who heard it from somebody designing food courts. They tend to have round tables in food courts because people don't stick around as longer. And if you think about it, you can't put your elbows on the table because it's round, right? Whereas when you're up against that straight line, you can hang around longer, put your elbows on the table and linger a little bit more, right? Great, awesome answers, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna run ahead because I really want us to get through some of these key points and have time for questions, so thank you. So how do we do this in design? When, by nature of our architecture, right, we have straight lines, love them or leave them, right, love them or hate them, we do have them, and there's ways that we can use our ingenuity and creativity to work well with these spaces, as was done here. But take a look at the shell. When you look at that, I mean, is it any wonder that our parents, parents of a certain generation anyway, would have kids stand in the corner where, 3 straight lines intersect, talk about negative energy. But think about what else accumulates in corners, right? Piles of laundry, dust bunnies, all kinds of stuff. In the well building standard, they actually have in cleaning accessibility, having seals along the floor to wall connection, because that curves it a little bit and makes it easier to clean, right? So energy can get stuck in corners, and especially the 3D corners there. So one of my big feng shui, I'm on a soapbox trumpeting this whole thing, is be mindful of your corners. Look at that, look at those curtains, those softer curved curtains, the plant, which is curved. You do something with the color, it's all kinds of things that you can do, but be proactive. If corners are naturally going to be energy draining, do something to enliven. So that's one thing that you can start to do so that those straight lines don't have to create a trap. So I'm just curious, actually, in your environment right now, look around. What have you got in the corners of the room you're in, if anything? That's always one of the first things I do in the environment. Bookshelf, samples, exercise bike. That exercise bike is a great way to shift the energy, provided you use it. If it doesn't become a laundry rack. Bookcases, basket with blankets, nice. Chair, awesome. Upholstered chair, angled chair, which also really helps shift the direction. Beautiful. Brilliant, folks. Thank you. All right, just going to move on so that we can take a little look. Now we have external corners as well. And, you know, the one on the left, notice how the access corner is sharp, but the inside one is round. Personally, why not soften all the corners? This is one thing I'm really on about. On the right-hand side is a restaurant I helped with in Japan. And the designer really went to town and had all of the corners rounded at my suggestion. And just look how much more inviting it is when you know you're not going to stab yourself in the thigh, and you can focus on, you know, piercing through whatever it is you're eating as opposed to your body. So a lot softer and inviting. So those straight lines there create that horizon and that sense of clarity, but then at body level, right? Rounded corners of the chair, rounded corners of the table, and so on. And of course, you know, you can't necessarily cover every edge, but even covering nearby, even if you're working near that straight edge or that corner, that can make a difference. And we're going to see some fantastic larger scale designs from our design community that put that. Just take a little look though at the iPhone and the Mac on the table as well. And you notice how they're not sharp corners on Mac's designs? Huh, gee, I just kind of wonder sometimes whether the organic form and curves and so on has anything to do with their popularity, despite the fact that their operating system isn't actually as good as it should be. How edgy are your tables and furniture? All right, sharp as a knife, to fully childproof and me-proof. How, what are your furniture choices like in your environment? Ooh, we got some sharp as a knife, eh? Okay. Oh. Interesting. Okay, how many? I'm curious how many can see one. I can see 4 people in the middle. That's good. Again, those straight lines can provide clarity and focus and precision. But corners, not a huge fan of the sharp corners, even if we like some of the straight edges. And straight edges that are curved a little bit, that still mitigates it, right? It's not as sharp if it's curved in one dimension. Along one plane. Thank you for your answers. And let's continue with some examples. So again, we saw this one before. Lots of straight lines, very high percentage. Very different here from our colleagues at M. Moser Associates. I've got a few of their images here. So we have a lot of straight lines, but those plants make a difference. And the diagonal also makes a difference because it varies. But where the people are sitting, there's that curved table, very curved chair. We tend to see a lot of these isolation booths these days, but notice how the curved corners makes a difference. It doesn't feel as boxy when you're in a box. And the tables and chairs, again, are all curved. And the table outside, the black table, also absolutely fantastic. fantastic, right? So you have the straight line, you have the benefit of the straight line on the glass. You don't want bumpy glass, right? It's annoying. You don't want a bumpy surface of the table. It's nice to write clearly and easily. Right? So beautiful design. Here too, that straight hallway, but look at what else is around it. Look at that diagonal, the ceiling and with the plants, right? Absolutely impeccable. Beautiful balance of both. More on the linear side, but incredibly well integrated. And here too, look at that gorgeous curve. They could just as easily have not done that curve, and it just looks absolutely fantastic there. With the round table, it's not good. Notice he's working on keeping his arms on the table, not the elbow, so he can hang around. And also the little booth he's sitting in, how that's curved at the top. And here too, look at that curved wall, how that just invites you into the next space. And again, straight lines can be great because it gives you a sense of horizon. So especially with walls, right, those 4 walls, it can be useful. And those gentle curves, if you can add them, can also be brilliant at those transition points. And here, look at this, upcoming in Vancouver, a new lobby by NCM Interiors in the B6 building. Look at that up there. I mean, this, for me, this design just blows my mind. Notice how there's the straight lines in the wood texturing at the top, and then the waves and the lighting help mitigate that. Even in the corner, far left corner, notice how there's a plant in front of the round beam. Everything is just beautifully incorporated there. And if it was too much, right, it could be too much. I find in this case, I think it looks great. I need to see it in person, but I absolutely love the elegance, the way they're really bringing in real nature and envision nature over there. I think is a phenomenal design. So kudos to MCM for that one. And I'll say that, you know, when I started doing these presentations with Chase 3.5 years ago, it was at the Technion showroom. And what I fell in love with Technion right away, that 108-degree angle that they've got for some of their partitions, and the fact that everything is so elegantly curved. I mean, it was just like immediately like, I love you guys, right? This is the kind of design that we need. Here's quite a story. So Sandy Hook Elementary School, if you heard about the shooting that took place there years ago, out of respect to the victims, they tore the building down and rebuilt it, and specifically brought in curved forms to make it more welcoming. This was a conscious choice that this would be softer and more inviting, and yet they have some very clear and very strong safety protocols built in, which are very well hidden in the design. There's a, you can Google and read about the rebuild. But that wave and the natural materials and so on, absolutely brilliantly done. And just a little note, when we were kids, everything we played with was curved. Pretty much, right? Lego maybe had some angles on it, but balls, balloons, all of those things, toys, all of that joyful stuff is curved. So interesting then, do that to a school and it really changes your environment, doesn't it? And right, some of the original biophilia research was done in the 80s with Ulrich, I believe it was, in hospitals. And look at the Singapore hospital, not just with the plants, but look at those curves up top. And again, you don't have to go this far, you don't have to go Gaudi, but my main, or Gaudi, my main inspiration here is really like, there are possibilities if we think outside the box. This is a place I saw in Tokyo, and notice how the base has that square, but also the corner has a different texture, and there's plants, and then the straight horizon of the apartments is mitigated by that angle and the curved corner. Right, so we are going to move into questions here. So that's just a summary of what it is that we've done. And finally, just one last little interactive piece. How can you start to mitigate, if you want to, the use of straight lines in your own space and in your designs? Is there, you can enter multiple answers. Is there something you inspire to do? Art. Abstract art is fantastic as well, right? As well as art of nature, foliage. Think about the balance, focus on breaking up the corners, add plants. Light fixtures, more plants, lots for the plants. Okay. Anything else? A dog bed. Yeah, let the dog sit in the corner, right? It'll be softer anyway, and it will bring a lot of activity and vitality. Soft materials. Fabulous answers, folks. I'm going to stop the screen share in a second. If you want to keep entering your answers, I'll prepare a PDF which can be sent out, so you can read yours and everyone else's answers. And time for questions and comments.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Very fascinating. I haven't seen any questions yet in the chat room, so please put your questions in there.
You can put them in there, or if you want to be brave
or
and
comments.
Yeah.
But before we get those, Mark, one of the things that you and I talked about yesterday, which I thought was fascinating, when we were talking about experiences, you also talked about kind of the linear design of experiences when it comes to picking a restaurant nowadays, where everybody will check it out first. We'll go on Yelp, and how those experiences have also been designed in a very linear way.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you don't know what's coming around the corner, you're willing to explore something you don't know without knowing it beforehand. And yet our cultural mindset, which is built on these straight lines, is I want to know, I want to be certain. So I'm going to read reviews before I go to this restaurant. I'm going to look it up on Google Maps and not maybe just wander around and see where I'm going, which, you told me you're from Holland, right? I mean, it's like, try walking in a straight line in any Dutch city. I actually hopped into taxi in Amsterdam because it was completely lost, and I was a block away from my hotel. I just had no idea because it was all so confusing. And yet that's the adventure, right? And all of that fun stuff comes from the not knowing. Yeah. And I think our addiction to certainty in a known and prescribed way actually limits our enjoyment, rather than, in the old days, you turn on the TV, see what's on. Yeah. Turn on the radio, you listen to what's there, as opposed to, I already know I like this and I'm going to enter it in my own playlist, and everything in my reality is customizable. So I have no tolerance for that which I have not already decided that I like and choose to experience. And I think this is a byproduct of the mindset that relates to, let's just go the fastest, most efficient way.
Mark, I got a few questions. What are the major effective elements in an office environment?
There's a whole lot, but I think if we're talking in this topic, I would say that there needs to be efficiency is part of it, right? So that is the benefit of linear design, right? Like you reach for your stapler and it's there, right? And so those linear designs, that really helps that efficiency. But if there isn't that softness, if there isn't a blend of colors, if there isn't that which varies from the rhythmic, which is like, same color, same approach. 2 weeks ago, our ergonomist who was speaking here, right? Was it Josh?
Josh, yeah.
He said, people are on about, oh, better to sit, better to stand. He's like, the real thing is not always doing the same thing. And that's, again, in the well-building standard, right? You sit and stand and you go between the two, and it's that change that helps. Those straight lines tell you there is no change. Those straight lines mitigated by curves, and especially nature, and we can see behind Laura Lee over there that we have some nice plants and everything in the background, that starts to invite that focus with creative expression. So, yeah.
So another question, if a linear design is complete, what should be the first priority to break it up?
Corners. Do what I was talking about with the corners and get some nature in there. Get the plants, because first of all, if it's that linear, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be white or off-white or some other kind of color of privilege, dare I say. If we want to speak about bringing diversity culturally into spaces, let's start with the color of the environments we're in also, and start breaking things up. So that monotony, if you have a monotone color, that is the same thing as a straight line on a different axis, only it's with the color palette, right? And that's what I meant by that non-rhythmic. I'm starting to take the principle of non-rhythmic and change it from oral, AU, like what you hear, into your actual experience, which also includes sitting, standing, not everything being linear. So I would say, the hard surfaces, a lot of it's really hard, right? You can't, we have limitations to what's available. And now, we are living at a time where we do have more options. And what we start to then add to the space helps to absolutely mitigate it. So look at corners and look at natural forms, and then the art also. All right, thanks for that.
Well, Laura mentioned there's more 120-degree design workstations again being introduced versus what we typically knew as the cubicle. So that breaks it up too, right? Those shapes.
Absolutely. I mean, this really the right angle thing. I mean, if you're going to have a right angle, how can we not get stuck on being right? And anything that's not right then is wrong, right? So where's the adaptability? Where's the creativity? So when I mean, it can seem, just kind of like a fun play on words, but this is quite literally the mindset that comes from what it is that we're cultivating and we're creating in these environments. There is an impact. And just like, you put a tea bag in hot water and the flavor seeps through, right? The reason Feng Shui is called wind and water is the energy of the space is like the air in the space or like the water in the cup. What you put in it, it absorbs the flavor. If those straight lines had a flavor, if you imagine it was bitter or sharp, that's the flavor of the stew, of the tea, of the environment, of the culture that you're marinating in day after day. And it is very hard not to absorb. As James Clear said, and he literally put it in his email today. If you don't know James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits, add it to your book list immediately. But I don't get commissions, but I probably should. But he said, your environment is the invisible guiding hand of your behavior. And you just said today, what is there in your environment that actually supports what it is you're trying to do? And if we're not aware of the subtext and the subliminal advertising and messaging and mindset shaping that comes from these forums, we are just going to be fitting in, and we are these round pegs fitting into square holes. I think it works that way. And after COVID, some of we might be a little bit rounder, but that's okay, because such is nature.
Mark, one more final question. What would you recommend for water features in an office environment?
Actually,
so well feature as well, right? And well,
yeah, it is. I actually recommend you to call a Feng Shui consultant about that, because I do recommend them, and they can be tricky if they're in the wrong place. You'll notice in Chinese restaurants that they have a water feature almost immediately right at the entrance. And if it's not well contained, if it's improperly angled, it can create more confusion and a little too much activity. In the right place, it is fantastic. And it does fit with that biophilic element of non-rhythmic, non-rhythmic sounds. And also just the fact that our bodies are what % water. And it helps us to feel welcome when there is that quality of actual clear water that's flowing and just expressing itself. But location is important for sure. Great questions. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mark. You and I definitely need to reconnect. Lots of ideas there. We hope we can have you again as a speaker in the future. But yeah, thank you so much. I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will be sending out a survey to you later in the day, so we will ask you to please, if you could respond to that survey, and so we can also learn more about the topics that you would like to see from us in the future. I also want to just again a reminder. So on November 18th is our next webinar with that intriguing title, "The Power of Acoustic Lighting." So CEU accredited. We hope that everybody will be joining us on that one as well. All right, we are within the hour, so everybody will have a few extra minutes back in their day. And thank you so much. And we all look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you all for joining. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Mark.